welcome to the Fierce and Fire podcast. I'm your girl Vianelli. Erica and I are so glad you are here. So grab on because you are in for a wild ride. We will cover various topics from politics, religion, and of course, relationships and sex, and everything else in between. We want to build fierce and fire women all over the world. We are here to empower and learn from each other. So stay tuned and listen in to our saucy conversation of the day.
Hello, Fierce and Fire Ones. So we're back.
Yes, like, ooh, so happy.
So we're talking to you, ladies and possibly gentlemen, about living in the hyphen. So what do you think about that?
When I think about that, it takes me back when I first came into this country from Dominican Republic and felt that it was such an exciting time, but at the same time I was scared because this was a whole different world and I had to find a way to merge both worlds at the same time. Like how was I gonna bridge both realities, being Dominican then now living in America? I was gonna live in the hyphen. I didn't want to forget Dominican Republic, but I also wanted to in a way assimilate, not forget one side when I'm learning about a new side, a new culture, new ideas, a new language.
So it's interesting because you had that experience when you came here to America and just trying to combine culture and identity at the same time. And
Yep.
for me, my living in the hyphen experience is a little bit almost the same, but a little different. So I grew up part of my life in New Jersey, and then the other half of my life, I grew up in Alabama. So when my parents decided to officially move to Alabama, I was in this unique place because I had this connection to my Afro-Latina side being here in up north, as they would say, and then going to the south, it was kind of like this period of which that part of my identity didn't exist only when I was at home.
Was it because it was a different type of culture? I mean, of course it is, because
Yeah.
comparing New Jersey to Alabama, I feel it's just two different type of mindsets.
Yes. So Southern culture is very different versus what is here, and I guess you would say in the North. So Southern culture is, for my experience, is sports, it's small, intimate family gatherings, it's church on Sunday. Some would argue it's the same thing here in Jersey.
Do see the perspective that you're speaking from.
It's a distinct difference because the town that I grew up in my formative years, people left their doors unlocked. Everyone knew who my parents were. Literally, there were only 3 gas stations in the town. The main grocery store was only one grocery store and a dollar store, and then there were cow patches. So that is a far cry from how I was growing up, still like kind of like a small inner city town, which, you know, was by the beach, versus going somewhere that was landlocked, not having that association with the part of my culture. It was like when I went to school, I was the African American girl, like everybody else. My dad was African American, my mom is Puerto Rican. So it's a mix between two different cultures. And then when I go home, it's almost like a code switching.
You're stating that it's different. It's actually still the same. Now that I hear you speaking about it, it's the same with me. It was being Latina, that I'm Dominican, my roots, you know, where I'm from, speaking Spanish, you know, my arroz, habichuela, carne, you know, all that. At home, I had that, but at school, it was totally different. So I do understand it from that way, especially when I didn't speak any English. So that, in that sense, I feel that we definitely have a similarity when it comes to that portion, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. So for all of you Fierce and Fire ones who are listening, at this point, we're giving you a little bit about what living in the hyphen means.
Yeah.
So I think for you all to be engaged in this conversation, we kind of have to give language to specifically how this came about and how this whole term, the hyphen, kind of coexist. Vianelli and I have a very unique experience in which the both of us happen to be Afro-Latinas, but we have a unique experience because I was raised a little bit in the South. Did you come from a rural area?
Kind of, but not really. There's, you know, you wouldn't think there's like the next house is 20 blocks away. No, it was, the houses were right next to each other. It was but it was not the city area. So it's semi-rural, but you were not that far from the city in that way.
Okay. Did it take you 10 minutes to get to the city?
Girl, yeah, no, it definitely took more than 10 minutes. Definitely took more
Okay.
than 10 minutes.
No. Then you were
What I
like
remember,
me.
girl, I don't remember much. I literally came here when I was 9 years old. I need to speak to my mama about this, okay? Thought I came through JFK. She's like, no, girl, you came through Newark. I'm like, what are you talking about? I saw JFK. And I was living in DR. I'm like, I can't wait to go to the US. Because in the US, you'll be able to learn English and go to New York and own this loft in New York. Yeah, okay. Living in the Hyphen, girl, you got a reality of what living in America was.
But the term itself. Well, the gentleman who wrote the original article was back in 1998. Is that correct?
Well, many people have written about it. He wasn't necessarily the original one, but I feel like the one that really stands out was Ilan Stavans, and it was in 1995. He wrote a book. It was The Hispanic Condition: Reflections on Culture and Identity in America. That was one of his really widely taught and disputed books. Here's where he described the experience of living in the hyphen between Latin and American, the you are a chameleon, that we live in this constant metamorphosis, transforming our past, adapting Spanish to new latitudes, and learning new behavior patterns, dreaming these unknown dreams, and just stay about living both in American and Latino culture. It's like this border culture. But instead of being a border, we should be able to merge and find who we are from both cultures. We shouldn't, alienate either or.
Yes, because both of those two cultures are both American experiences, quote unquote.
Exactly, and they make who you are as an individual, because what makes me is not what makes you. What makes you does not make the next person. Their culture and their environment and where they come from, whether it's both sides, specifically when living in the hyphen, it could be, for example, the whole culture that we said, from coming from different countries to moving from one state to a different state. It could be also other topics that we're going to cover later on, but that's just in the in-between. Don't live in the in-between, live within both of them.
So yeah, Sarah, hopefully I'm not butchering her name, Sarah Melchizedek, wrote in 2014 also another version of Living in the Hyphen. She discussed how herself and her husband were living abroad, and their experience, and then coming to the US. They had lived for such a long time. She lives in numerous places. That's what the article talks about. But specifically, she was talking about when they came back here to the US to go to grad school, and then switching the transition from Spanish to English, and how she felt like some of that language was just disappearing. So the other thing is, she gave reference to the term Spanglish, which was a term that was coined in 1948 by Puerto Rican humorist Salvador Theo. He was talking about just the nuance between, Puerto Ricans who were trying to, at this point, be assimilated. And essentially, he was talking about this juxtaposition at this time where Puerto Ricans were being assimilated in a borderline way of American culture by learning English. I'm not sure if anyone knows, but Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth of the United States. We're not going to get into the nuances of that, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, he was concerned with the loss of language being lost.
Yes.
And how much culture and identity and language is so important, because if you don't have language, sometimes with the culture, the identity is lost.
Exactly, disappears. Listening about Theo again, I think about when I speak Spanglish. I try not to, because I feel sometimes a little uncomfortable, and I feel that I do it more than I should. We'll say that I'm talking to you, yeah, estoy hablando contigo, yeah, but I went to el carro y después de eso, I got my drink. Do understand where he's coming from. It does take away from the Spanish language and how beautiful it really is.
So I'm going to take it a step further. From being an Afro-Latina and to being someone who, I'm going to say a thing that Puerto Ricans always get,
I know.
make the jokes.
I know.
A lot of people make jokes on, yeah, you Puerto Rican, but you don't speak. Do habla español? I will say this. I had a very deep and intensive talk with my mom about the decision as to why she did not teach me Spanish. Now, my sister and my brother both speak Spanish. Okay. My sister ended up learning how to speak Spanish because when my mom had me, she ended up going to stay with my grandmother. So she had my great grandmother and my grandmother and my grandfather. So there was no choice but to learn Spanish.
She was surrounded.
Yes. My brother honestly ended up learning Spanish when he was in college, because all of his friends, they made fun of him because it was the joke about Puerto Rican how authentic a Puerto Rican that doesn't speak Spanish. So his friends happen to be, of Mexican heritage and descent.
Mm-hmm.
So they pushed him to learn and speak Spanish. He
That's good.
sometimes feels a little bit shaky, but he's still in the in-between stages. Myself, during quarantine, I did start taking a Spanish class.
Yes.
But the reason why I bring this up and I'm talking about it, the connection to culture, what happens in my family, from even us going to church, like growing up in the Catholic Church, going to catechism and doing all those things, having my grandma light candles and saying certain prayers in Spanish and all those things. All of that has to do with my cultural identity.
Yep, that's right.
And who I am as not just as a woman, although I do understand being Afro-Latina is very nuanced, because I see myself as a Black woman in the world, but I do understand that the Hispanic part of me that's a part of my culture, because a lot of that was integrated in how I grew up at Christmases, at Thanksgivings, and, religious practices.
That you refer yourself as a Black woman, and I do as well, but see it a little different because define myself as Latina. I feel like I'm Latina. I'm not taking away from being Afro-Latina.
No,
because I don't know. It's just since I came here, I always just tell people, what are you? Since I was 1997, since I came to this country, I'm Latina. I'm Dominican. Just because my Latina-ness is so strong, it does not take away from my African culture and where I'm from, because I know where my identity comes from. I did my DNA test, so I know where my African roots lie. And the last several years, I definitely have endured more my Afro-Latina-ness. And that's not saying that I never didn't, but I was so strong on me being Latina. I felt that embodied everything.
Well, the thing is, I think what we have to understand here is, I get what you're saying, because for so long they didn't have language. Let's be real about it. And Latin culture, we had this thing where, depending on, we're going to get into it about colorism. Up until recently, we did not have language for, or to identify of that Black side, that African side of who we are.
Not in a positive way. Because there are several articles that both you and myself have read. There's words that people called people, especially Latino, which Africa definitely talks about the colorism, which was something that we also got to talk about, because that's also in a way living in a hyphen when it comes to white passing, or if skin color is white, or if you're darker color, if you're a chocolate color or caramel color. There are parts that you are living in a hyphen, not in the sense of culture's diversity, that what we spoke about,
but privilege.
But privilege. You're living in the hyphen of privilege, and that's something that you need to understand, whether you are white or whether you are white passing because you are Latina or Latino. And that's something that I feel a lot of Latinos don't take into consideration. Because you look white, unfortunately, you are going to be considered white passing. There's things that you're going to be able to do compared to other people that are darker than you will not be able to do, or people will make a big deal that's something that's really not.
And then I'm going to say this, that's that politics of skin.
That's very true.
The politics of our skin cannot be undone. And that's what we have to understand, not just as a Latinx or Afro-Latina or Afro-Latin community or Latino community. Our skin in itself is political. Like, I hate to say it like that, but it is.
Honestly, everything is driven through skin in all aspects. It comes to making rules and laws. If you look today, which we're not going to get into right now, into the politics of what rules and regulations were in place before compared to what's leaving now and what's changing, was depending upon the hatred or the love of a skin or other individuals because they're different than you.
So there's this thing too within the Latin culture of the La Raza, lightening the rain. Sometimes depending on what your aunt, your tia may say, or what your grandma may say at the party, or in certain families. Sometimes, even till now, there are certain cousins in the family that cannot step through tia's door, who is 80-something years old, because they're too dark. Now, what I'm saying is very gingerly, because some of this is not my experience. Some of this is just experiences from people who I love, who have shared with me. And I'm also being very loving and when I'm saying this, because it's a real experience. So I know there are going to be people who are shocked that we are in 2021 and thinking, but how could this possibly be? How can you have family that still is asking their own family to stand outside their house because they're not the appropriate shade to walk through the door? It happens.
Wow, that's just.
And so
I don't even know what to say to that, honestly, Erica.
And this is a true story. This is a real thing. So what I'm saying here is this term Afro-Latina, Afro-Latin, and this connection, which a lot of conversations across like generations of Latinos and Latinas trying to understand why the younger generation is trying to have this connection with Blackness is because they're trying to bridge the gap of this idea, the kinky curly hair, the darker skin. If I'm not looking like, as much as I love J-Lo and I'm repping her or whatever, I still love Amara Negra.
Yes, Amara La Negra, we love you, baby girl. Don't worry, your time is coming. Yes.
I still love Celia Cruz.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because those women show. When I see those women, I see myself. I don't see a dark-skinned woman. I see a beautiful Afro-Latin woman who is connected in her identity and her culture and every ounce of her being.
And she loves herself, loves how she is. Because Amara La Negra, that hair, that face, that skin, she's just beautiful. And not just saying it because
she's on television,
she's on television, or she's very famous. No, it's because it's just what I follow her, what I've seen from her.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be around her, this really cool type of mellow individual. And I love that she loves her Blackness, that she's black, she's a Black Dominicana, and she's proud of that. She's Afro-Latina, she has this Afro-Latinidad, and she wants to share it with, with everyone. And I love that she brings that to the table. You, myself, and everybody is able to set a line and see, other girls could say, wow, she looks like me, or I look like her.
For me, I recently, as a grown woman, had this epiphany when I talked to you about Sunny Holton. But I did not realize, I knew she was Puerto Rican, but I did not realize that she was Puerto Rican and African American like me.
Gotcha.
And to have someone to say that plainly, to say, I'm Puerto Rican and I'm African American, so I'm Afro-Latina, I'm gonna say, like, sometimes when there's a mix of Blackness in our Hispanic roots, sometimes people just tend to lean like, I'm Puerto Rican, but you forget that you are the other side of it.
The Dominicans, let's be honest, tend to be, not all, because, Latinos, we don't
want to do it like a blanket,
Latinos were all different colors, all different shades, but a lot of Dominicans that I've noticed, a lot of them are darker skin, they tend to think that they're not Black. I just sit there and just stare, and I just want to know what doesn't click in their head that you are from motherland. And I don't mean Dominican Republic, because DR is motherland, but I mean from Africa, motherland, like legit motherland. You are from Africa, and that's something that we need to embrace. When we don't embrace that, then there's no way that we're gonna love ourselves for who we are, and we're gonna love others for looking and being different than us, especially when it comes to color and that colorism in Latinos culture.
I also understand both of us. You're fairer than I am, and I happen to be like in between, like almost like a little bit caramel color, right?
Yes.
The both of us are not chocolate brown women. So, but we also have to acknowledge our skin color has granted us
very true
some privileges.
Oh.
And saying this, I know this is going to rub a lot of my Latinx sisters and brothers who happen to be a little bit lighter. It's going to rub them the wrong way. But I need you guys to stick in with the conversation to understand where we're going.
Yes.
The reason why I'm bringing this up is because you have to understand that the same laws that separated the African American community, again, we're going to try to stay specifically where we are here in the nuance of our identity and in how in our area, the same laws that have caused segregation, that has caused issues for equality, still impacts the same way a little bit. It's on the flip side, still within the confines of race and color and identity and politics of the skin, still apply within the Latin community. I'm saying this because sometimes within our own culture, people tend to say, we don't have racism. Or the thing that happens with the Americans and the African Americans, or the African Americans and the white people, Latinos and Latinas, we don't have that. We are just all, we are all kumbaya.
Yeah, no, nunca, like they say, nunca, eso nunca pasa aquí, nunca pasa aquí. Oh yeah, that never happens here. Yeah, okay.
No,
all right,
that is not true.
Right.
That is not true. Because I can give an example in my own life. My mother is, much significantly lighter than I am. My brother and I are both the caramel in between, and my sister is this beautiful hue of chocolate.
Yes, she
We
did.
were all, now my sister and I look alike. The only difference is everything is small on her and I'm a little bit bigger. So, but it's clear we're sisters. So we were out somewhere. My sister calls for my mom. She says, "Mommy." And so my mom turns around and someone says, "That's your mom?" My sister says, "Yes." I think we were in Miami. But then she said something to the person in Spanish. So she was, "Yes, I'm the negrita. That's still my mom." I understand even from the unique microcosm of that experience of us all being out together and my sister calling my mom and someone turning around and just being like, "That's not your mother," questioning why she's saying that, showing that juxtaposition of colorism and the ignorance that we have. You could have a child, that's the whole genetic side of that. You could have a child that comes out, looking caramel or looking fair.
So that's when we need to talk about genetics. There's Google, there is YouTube, there is a vast of knowledge that you can seek and learn about the probability of inheritance when it comes to the likelihood of someone inheriting specific traits. And what Erica was talking about in reference to hair color, skin color, eye shape, your ear shape, that goes back to simple biology of the Punnett square. Punnett was a geneticist in the 20th century, which he came up with the Punnett square. And we need to sometimes just sit back and really think about that and really think about how genetics can happen. You can have a lighter skinned mother and father with a darker child. You can have a darker parents with a lighter child and vice versa. That's genetics. You can have 20 kids and all 20 kids could look different.
Yeah, you could get a throwback in there. And let me tell you,
Throwback.
yeah, there was a few years back, I can't remember when, African couple in Europe had a throwback and their baby came out blonde hair, blue eyes, not albino. And of course, the parents were questioning hospital head.
Oopsies.
Yeah, possibly gave them the wrong baby by mistake. So then the dad was looking sideways like, so it was the whole thing. They did a DNA test and it was both the parents' babies. So what they explained is it was a throwback. There was another similar situation that happened in South Africa. The same thing. It's a movie. I can't remember what the movie's name is, but it's based off a true story. It was a throwback that happened, that the couple was white and they had a black baby because they had black DNA.
Exactly. Is that DNA? It's so important. Rebuilding who you are and who you will be and what type of skin, hair, eyes, everything in your body is going to be. Latinos need to take some time to sit back and really understand our own biases when it comes to the color of your skin. There's so many people around me that I see, whether family or friends, sometimes I do not speak to anymore because there's certain things that what's the purpose of you judging someone for their skin because you're white passing or white or lighter, specifically if you're Latino, makes you better than anyone else. It doesn't.
And also acknowledging that there is this thing of privilege. We have to talk about it in the minority community, not just within the Latinx community, but there's a privilege of colorism. We are taking it from the perspective of a woman's view. If we're talking about specifically how darker skinned women tend to be portrayed in the media, they're always portrayed hyper-sexualized. They're always portrayed as aggressive, assertive. I can name numerous of movies where there are women who are racially ambiguous, lighter, or they cast women who are in the realms of the caramel to the lighter. They make her soft, or ends up being the white. So we cannot pretend that the media doesn't also portray this identity of darker skin. And then we could take it out further when we talk about how black men are highlighted in film and television the same way. When it comes to darker skinned men in film, you have them casted as thugs.
Going into the psychist of a time period where we're into what you were saying before, like the more natural aspect, for example, when it comes to the curly hair, when it comes to allowing individuals of minority to actually be in films, for a Latina to play a Latina, for a black person to play a black person, instead of having someone that's not of that ethnicity or race play that individual. They're giving other actors or other individuals more roles, more opportunities, but of course, a lot left, specifically in Hollywood.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to span out the narrative of stories, and there's a lot of work to also have representation. Now we're going to talk about the representation of hair. So the both of us have done something very specifically unique, like many of women across the United States and probably across the world. We're starting to embrace our natural hair.
Yes.
I went on a big chop journey. You went on a big chop journey as well.
We both did.
I can tell you that this has been a long time coming. And I'm thankful for the quarantine period.
Me too.
Because I don't think I would have had the patience to go through this process under normal circumstances.
I understand where you come from.
You want to look like yourself and you want to feel sexy and feel like you got it. Learning how to change different products and what works, it's hard as hell because sometimes the twist out comes out right, sometimes it doesn't.
Yep, that's very true.
You know, and
you get angry.
Vianelli and I have gotten on a call and she was like, I thought you washed your hair. Why is it wrapped in a scarf? It didn't come out right. This is my ministry for today.
Girl, I spent days in my hair in a wrap, so I am not dealing with this. People need to understand when you go natural,
it's expensive.
It's not just expensive. No, I'm talking about the detangling portion.
Oh hell yeah!
You take one side and the other side. It's like really.
Shout out to all the 4A people.
Hey,
I'm your girl.
3Bs, 3Cs. I'm your girl, but you need to give me advice because I'm new to this. I've been watching Curls by Ellie. Thank you so much because I watched your videos, girlfriend. She just gives different hairstyles because that's what it is. You have to search out there. What's your hairstyle? What can I do? Because you feel like, oh, it's only curly hair and then that's it. No, you can do so many things. A pineapple, a ponytail, whatever that's called. You see, I'm learning. I'm still new to the game, okay?
But you know, this is an important conversation because not too long ago was a law enacted, I believe was it by the Supreme Court that, you know, specifically with the lock, lawyers can't discriminate based off a hairstyle. People who are in the Latinx community and the African American community, hair is very much a part of our culture. How we do it, the hairstyles that we choose, the colors that we choose, all of that is very nuanced. For a long time, hair in a fro or having it curly would be considered not kept. Even though it's styled, it's not appropriate for work. It's too exotic.
Exactly.
You get those little sides.
And you know what? In Spanish, they call it, oh, tú tienes pelo malo. You got bad hair. Oh, kinky hair. Oh, you got poofy hair.
We've been on the journey, and we support everyone else who is on the journey. Send us some hair tips in our inboxes. Please. We will greatly appreciate it. This conversation up about skin and white passing, we just want you to understand that you have this unique opportunity to be like a bridge. And when you see injustice or when you see someone who is being treated unfairly, or when you hear or you're in conversations at home and when people are saying things that are not correct or they're not backed up by accurate data, you know, it may get exhausting, it may get tiring. People may be older than you, but it's important right now that we all speak up, whether it's at home, whether it's in the workplace, or whether it's in the grocery store, that we all stand up for each other and politely and correctly, as much as we can, help others to elevate to understanding that we are all unique human beings and that treating anyone differently because of what they look like or the color of their skin is not okay. And it should not be tolerated. We're simply asking for all of us in this space to be allies. And we're simply asking everyone to awaken to their privilege. Doesn't matter that we are all minorities. It's awakening also to the privilege that you have uniquely within that microcosm of being a minority as well.
How can I find a way to change, or how can I change the movement? How can I be part of the movement? This is one thing you can do when someone does something that you know that's wrong, or you speak up. You speak up. That's the way that you start, by speaking up, like Erica said, nicely, correctly, and back it up with data.
Exactly. Just as simple as that. That's all of us can do. And we're putting this episode out during Black History Month. We want to acknowledge that this is a time, Black History Month is not just condensed down to 1 and 4 weeks, and then that's all African Americans in the United States has contributed to this country. We decided to talk about the Latinx experience within Black History Month because we feel that it coincides with Black identity, but obviously highlighting Black History Month. But we couldn't necessarily full-heartedly talk about Black culture because we are in a hyphen. We identify within that Afro Latinx side of us, wanted to pay homage and give some information while also trying to create allyship. So by now, all of you have listened to this episode. We have given you something to think about. What we are going to give you a call to action. We want you guys to play this episode maybe for your tias, your tios, or your friends or your girlfriends.
Yes.
And have a conversation about living in the hyphen. It doesn't matter. You may see yourself as Afro-Latina, see yourself as Latinx or Latino.
Should start to get the conversation going. We want you to be aware of your culture and what living in the hyphen means, and that metamorphosis that you could let it become.
Hey, Fierce and Fire Ones, it's your girl Erica. Don't forget the conversation just doesn't stop on this podcast episode today. We will continue to engage and have saucy inspired conversations on our Instagram at Fierce and Fire 2021. We can't wait to see what type of sauciness that you bring. Thank you again for listening.